Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Chairman and Secretary, thank you very much. I was able to visit in this setting not too many days ago with General Milley. I wanted to start this conversation by talking about the unfunded requirement list that includes $3.1 billion to increase your in-strength levels beyond the FY2018 NDAA mandate. I want to have a conversation about how those brigades will be divided. What kind of brigades do we need? I asked this of General Milley, and his indication in my paraphrase is we're probably going to need to rebalance the force with additional armor capabilities. Assistance brigades, we're going to introduce those. The new threat environment, I assume in your assessment, means that we're going to need to rebalance those brigade structures. With the Russian aggression, our reassurance efforts, the conversation this morning about Afghanistan, I do know that back-to-back armored brigade combat team deployments to Europe is occurring. I know that the Big Red One in Kansas is part of that. We'll have 4,000 of those soldiers with the second armored BCT to Europe this fall. What do you believe, I guess, Mr. Secretary, is the right mix of light armor, light attack, armor, and advise and assist brigades, and consequently, where will the BCTs acquire training?
Right. Yep. Those brigades will be joining the general purpose force. So what we do is we look at what is the threat as best we can determine. I'll ask the chairman to give any of his thoughts on it. I'll probably have to take this one for the record, Senator, but I would just tell you, sir, that as we put this proposal forward, if we do not remove the Budget Control Act caps and we bring those troops in, the only way we'll be able to pay them 2 years from now is by stopping, again, modernization. So there's a danger here to even discuss this if we don't look at the broader budgetary horizon. But to specifically answer your question, Chairman.
You were very successful in using my question to make your point one more time.
Senator, when we talk full spectrum, what we're really saying is that, the United States of America, given our security challenges, can't prepare for Russia and China or violent extremism. We've got to prepare for all of those challenges. So General Milley and I have had this conversation about what the Army ought to look like. General Milley has sat down with the Secretary and spoken about that. And the two areas that he highlighted in the conversation with you are two of the areas that we have found now to be very stressed. One is armor brigades. Even the rotation now, as you know, it's a pretty tight turn. What that impacts is the amount of time that our soldiers are home, but it also affects the amount of training that they're able to do across the spectrum. And right now, even our armor brigades have been probably more singularly focused on violent extremism and the challenges in Syria and so forth than we would like to have. And so increasing the armor capacity is something that General Milley has spoken about. In terms of the advise assist brigades, that's an initiative that the Army has been working on now for a couple of years, and General Milley's leadership has kind of pushed that over the goal line. He briefed the Secretary on it very shortly after the Secretary came in, so that the Army had specific units to meet what we believe to be an enduring requirement to grow partnership capacity. Our methodology for dealing with the violent extremism problem in particular is to train local forces so they can assume responsibility for security in their countries, and those advise assist brigades are designed exactly to do that. I would emphasize one point the Secretary made, and that's our caution in growing capacity now without certainty about what the next several years would be. In other words, the worst thing we could do now is grow capacity and then not have the funds available to properly train and equip those units. I do believe that we'll have to grow. I think the defense security review that the Secretary will lead will indicate a need to grow in capacity, and I think the areas that General Milley identified are certainly going to be reinforced by that study. But the one experience that both Secretary Mattis and I had was when we both served as lieutenants and captains, we had bigger forces than we were able to provide adequate leadership, adequate training, and adequate equipment. And so I would just say balance means two things. It means being prepared to deal with threats across the spectrum, and it also means that we have a balance in our training equipment and personnel to make sure that the units are whole.
Let me just highlight in the 20 seconds I have remaining that I want to be able to say this because I recently took a backseat ride in a light attack fighter, the Scorpion, over the skies of Kansas. And I want to highlight for you this issue that we're going through a process of a new attack fighter developed by the private sector, and would want you to respond, perhaps take one for the record, about its value to the entire military. At the moment, there's a bit of a focus by the Air Force, but I have the view that it has a value to a broad array of our military efforts.
Yes, sir, we're on board with it. The first test was done out at CENTCOM, and I'm keenly aware of that test, and we are watching it closely. Has a lot of promise.
Thank you, sir.